So, Tim, with the NFL draft, a lot of this has to do with how early you get in on these bets. But if someone was looking to make a bet still, and again, if you are in Las Vegas, you must get this bet in before 24 hours before the draft. But if you're anywhere else, you can probably bet pretty much up until the draft. What is a place that you would look for a bet that's still available?
Yeah, it's always tricky, right? These markets move so much, Danielle. But one bet that's still available at Circa Sports is Deontay Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. His over-under sitting at 21.5. Juice slightly to the under at -130. I think he goes in the top 21 picks, Danielle. So that would be a bet I would still place today. It is a bet that I do have in pocket. Many people believe that Deontay Banks, the way that he tested at the NFL Combine, running a 4.35, is going to be a riser come Thursday. And there's some belief. Tony Pauline, draft analyst, even mentioned this in one of his rumblings from around the league, that he could go ahead of Joey Porter Jr., cornerback out of Penn State, whose over-under is around 18.5 or so. So Deontay Banks under 21.5. And certainly a run of corners early with Devon Witherspoon and then Christian Gonzalez would be very beneficial to this bet. But I think Deontay Banks very well could be selected before Joey Porter Jr., and I'm betting on it to happen. So give me under 21.5 for the Maryland corner, Deontay Banks. The last one that really gets me excited is Devon Witherspoon, whether it's a matchup against Christian Gonzalez or just to be the first defensive back selected. I think Devon Witherspoon, the corner out of Illinois, I have a pretty big position on him going ahead of Christian Gonzalez and being the first defensive back on the board. Everything that you hear, a lot of excitement around Devon Witherspoon.
JVT, Jonathan VonTobel, our VSiN betting analyst. I know you're the host of Hardwood Handicappers, but he also likes other sports. And we have the NFL draft coming up on Thursday. What other bets are you excited about?
The other would be the corner out of Illinois, Devon Witherspoon. His draft position prop is set at 6.5, and I bet that thing over. And that was at about a pick when I bet it. I'm not sure. Again, might be like -6,000 by the time that, by the time we're talking right now. But I think it just comes down to when you're looking at the way the top of the draft breaks down and what you expect from these top 5 selections, I just don't know if there's much wiggle room for him to be inside of the top 6. We're talking about Carolina and Houston. I think we can chalk those up to quarterbacks. Talking about Arizona, who's begging to get out of that spot, maybe for a quarterback to go there, but if not, a defensive player. Indianapolis, heavily tied to Will Levis. You have Seattle, who is a very good spot for Jalen Carter. And then you're talking about Detroit right there. Detroit is the spot that potentially could grab Devon Witherspoon. But I think when you're looking at the value of corner and what you're looking at for some of these others, I think the probability is a little bit higher that he slips out of 6 and goes to 7 or 8 to either Las Vegas or Atlanta. I thought at a small minus price that was worth it. So I've got over 6.5 for the draft position of one Devon Witherspoon.
Danielle Navarre from VSiN here with Jeff Parles of VSiN, co-host of VSiN Best Bets. Jeff, we have the NFL draft. What is your favorite bet that you have on the NFL draft?
I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit here. You go to those draft team specials that are available at DraftKings, Danielle. Mm-hmm. And the Philadelphia Eagles, defending NFC East, defending NFC champions, right now they're -140 to draft a lineman with their first pick. I don't see that happening. Their line is firm. I have a lot of people who cover that team, and I'm like, look, they may take a lineman, but it should not be favored right now. It should not be having to lay a price at -140. So I like there's 2 options in there that I actually like. I do like +170 defensive lineman / edge. It would not shock me at all, especially if the lack of pressure that they got in the Super Bowl against Mahomes, if they go for an edge rusher. But I actually think they're going to go kick it a little old school here. I like Bijan Robinson out of Texas to go to Philadelphia with their first pick. So at 3-1 on the running back, Bijan Robinson's landing spot with the Eagles is also at 3-1. I think Bijan Robinson going to Philadelphia makes a whole lot of sense with their first pick, which is the Saints pick that they got in the Olave deal last year. But I like 3-1 on running back. I also don't mind if you want to take another one, taking +170 defensive lineman / edge, because that direction would not shock me either. They're both plus prices. You'd end up with a little bit of a profit if you took them both.
Kelly, with the NFL draft coming up, do you have a favorite bet that you've made so far that maybe people can still get in on?
Yeah, there's it's kind of funny because this is going to be one of those drafts where hopefully I've got a lot of winners, but if there's a lot of winners, Danielle, there's going to be a lot of losers too, because there's with all the information as it's been circling around, there's definitely been some bets I've made that look good. There's been some bets that made that look pretty dang bad. There's two out there right now that I still like. One that I made just yesterday. I played over 1.5 running backs selected in the first round. I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get a lot of love here. We've been hearing that in some of the mocks. We've been hearing that in some of the reports. I do think he ends up being a first round pick. So I played over 1.5 running backs at plus 122. I know that is about minus 150 or higher now. I think if you're in
minus 205 at DraftKings on running backs in the first round, which is crazy, right? We see that a lot with running backs.
Yeah, obviously, of course, I was just going to say if it was under minus 200, I'd probably still play it. So, of course, you had to come in and say minus 205 now. So, but shop around. There's always one to shop around.
And these numbers are bouncing around. So
it is. It is. They are. And I think this is also a perfect example, though, Danielle, of where, okay, over 1.5 running backs. How can we basically bet the same thing a different way, right? So that is one where you should compare then Gibbs. What's the odds for him to be drafted in the first round? What's his draft position look like if you find a shop with that? All of these you should compare before making a bet and figuring out what the best price you're going to get is. When I did it yesterday, it made most sense to bet the over 1.5 running backs at plus 122. But as you're talking about, those odds have shifted big time. It might make sense to look elsewhere to kind of get that same bet. One other one that I really like right now, I don't have a book that's offering this to me. Over at DraftKings, Zay Flowers to be the second wide receiver drafted is at plus money. I think about plus 120 right now. I love that bet. I think that's my favorite bet that's still on the board. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is definitely the first wide receiver that we see go, without a doubt. I don't know how many first-round wide receivers we're really going to see. We have not heard much about some of these other guys recently. Addison and Johnston. We heard a lot about them about 4 or 5 months ago. Really doesn't feel like we've heard a lot of positive things about them recently. Meanwhile, Zay Flowers is out working out with Patrick Mahomes. There's a lot of buzz about this guy. Speedster coming out of Boston College. I think he's definitely the second wide receiver to get selected. So at plus money, I think that's a really good bet you could make right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up because, like you said, second wide receiver selected, Zay Flowers is at plus 120. But if you look, another way to bet this, or another option, is who will be drafted earlier. You look at Jigba versus Addison or Flowers versus Hyatt, and those odds are just not as favorable. So you could look to, will be the second one drafted and get some plus money.